My name is Jason, 31 years old, now living in the penthouse I bought with my tech company earnings. Far from the forgotten child whose achievements collected dust while my brother Eric basked in endless praise. I never expected the desperate call from my mother yesterday, her voice strained as she explained their financial ruin and medical crisis. After 15 years of minimal contact, she was asking for my help, a sum that would barely dent my accounts but would save them from homelessness. The irony wasn't lost on me. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see how karma finally balanced the scales in a family that threw away one child to worship another. I remember when life felt normal. Until I was 5, my childhood memories paint a picture of a typical middle-class American family. Mom and Dad both worked respectable jobs. We lived in a comfortable suburban home in Michigan, and I received the love and attention any child would expect from their parents. Dad would toss a baseball with me in the backyard after work, and Mom would proudly display my kindergarten art projects on the refrigerator. They attended my school events, took photos, and told me they were proud of me. I was their only child, and I felt secure in their love. Everything changed when Eric was born. I was initially excited about having a baby brother, imagining us playing together and becoming best friends as we grew up. I still remember peering into his crib, making silly faces to try to make him laugh. When my parents brought him home from the hospital, they treated his arrival like a coronation. The house was suddenly filled with balloons, flowers, and a steady stream of visitors bringing gifts. At first, I thought this was normal for a new baby. But as months passed, I began noticing subtle shifts in how my parents behaved toward me. My 6th birthday party was abbreviated because Eric needed a nap. When I learned to ride my bike without training wheels, Dad was too busy filming Eric rolling over to watch. Mom started referring to Eric as her miracle baby and special boy, terms of endearment I had never heard directed at me. By the time Eric was 2 and I was 7, the favoritism had become impossible to ignore. Christmas morning revealed the stark contrast between our piles of presents. My modest stack of practical gifts like clothes and educational books paled next to the mountain of toys and expensive items for Eric. When I asked why Santa brought Eric more presents, Mom simply said, "Eric is younger, honey. He needs more things." I tried everything to regain my parents' attention and approval. I brought home perfect spelling tests, learned to make my own bed, and offered to help with chores around the house. My efforts earned brief nods or distracted good jobs, while Eric received effusive praise for scribbling with crayons or putting away a single toy. The summer before 3rd grade, I won a reading contest at the local library, reading 30 books in 2 months. When I proudly showed my parents the certificate and small trophy, Mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Jason," before returning her attention to Eric, who was stacking blocks. Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. Later that same day, when Eric successfully used the potty, my parents celebrated like he had won an Olympic medal, taking photos and calling grandparents to share the news. My 8th birthday party crystallized the new family dynamic. Mom had promised me a special celebration with friends from school and a trip to the local arcade. 3 days before the party, Eric took his first swimming lesson and managed to put his face in the water. My parents immediately decided to move my birthday celebration to our backyard to save money for an expensive series of private swimming lessons for Eric. My friends still came. But instead of the arcade adventure I had anticipated, we had a hurried cake cutting in the backyard, while my parents took turns showing guests videos of Eric's swimming achievement. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in my room examining my few birthday gifts. I overheard Mom and Dad in the kitchen discussing how to rearrange the family budget to accommodate Eric's new swimming lessons. "We can cut back on the groceries," Mom suggested. "And maybe Jason can wait until Christmas for those new school shoes he needs." Something shifted in me that day. I began to understand that in our family, my needs and wants would always come second to Eric's. Rather than continuing to seek the approval I would never receive, I started developing a new approach. I would excel not for their recognition, but for myself. I became self-reliant out of necessity, learning to manage my disappointments privately, to find satisfaction in my own accomplishments, whether they were celebrated or not. Eric, meanwhile, was growing into his role as the family prince. By age 4, he had learned that a tantrum in the grocery store would result in a new toy, that refusing to eat dinner would prompt Mom to prepare him a special alternative meal, and that breaking my belongings rarely resulted in Consequences. He was not an inherently bad child, but rather one being shaped by the dangerous message that he was special, exceptional, and deserving of preferential treatment, simply for existing. When Eric started preschool, Mom volunteered in his classroom 3 days a week. She had never once volunteered in mine. At parent-teacher conferences, my consistently excellent grades and exemplary behavior warranted only a quick conversation, allowing my parents to spend the majority of their allotted time discussing how to nurture Eric's creative spirit when he struggled to follow classroom rules. As I approached middle school, I had fully accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I had become the reliable child who caused no trouble, required minimal attention, and functioned independently. Meanwhile, Eric remained the sun around which our family orbited his needs, dictating our schedules, finances, and priorities. I did not yet know the term golden child, but I was living in the shadow of one, learning lessons about family dynamics that would shape my understanding of love, worth, and relationships for years to come. Middle school marked a new chapter of disparate treatment. At 11 years old, I entered 6th grade with determination to excel academically. By the end of my first semester, I had achieved straight A's and earned a spot on the advanced math team. When I brought home my report card, Mom glanced at it briefly before returning to her magazine. "That's what we expect from you, Jason," she said without enthusiasm. Dad gave me a distracted nod from behind his newspaper, adding, "Good job, keep it up." Neither suggested a celebration or special acknowledgement of my achievement. That same week, Eric brought home a C- on his spelling test, a significant improvement from his previous D. My parents took him out for ice cream, put the test paper on the refrigerator, and called grandparents to share the news of his breakthrough. The contrast was so stark that even at 11 I recognized the fundamental unfairness of the situation. As 7th grade began, I joined the science club and started developing a genuine passion for computer programming. The school had a limited number of outdated computers, but our science teacher, Mr. Barrett, recognized my aptitude and allowed me to stay after school to use the equipment. When I asked my parents for a basic computer for Christmas, they told me computers were expensive luxuries that weren't necessary for a middle schooler. On Christmas morning that year, Eric unwrapped a new gaming system with 5 games. When I couldn't hide my disappointment about not receiving the modest computer I had requested, Mom pulled me aside. "Jason, you know Eric struggles more than you do. He needs extra encouragement and rewards. You're already doing well on your own." That winter, Dad lost his job when his company downsized. Suddenly, our comfortable middle-class lifestyle was threatened. Mom took a part-time job at a local department store, and family discussions centered around cutting expenses. Yet somehow these cutbacks applied almost exclusively to household expenses and my activities. When my advanced math team qualified for a regional competition requiring a $200 travel fee, Mom explained they simply couldn't afford it. 2 weeks later, they spent $400 on new hockey equipment for Eric, despite his history of abandoning sports after brief periods of interest. When I pointed out this discrepancy, Dad replied sharply, "Eric needs sports for his confidence. Your math stuff comes naturally to you." By 8th grade, I had started mowing lawns and shoveling snow in the neighborhood to earn my own money. I saved carefully, putting away every dollar I could toward my future computer and college dreams. Meanwhile, Eric was struggling academically. Despite expensive tutors, my parents somehow found money to hire. When he received a C on a project I had secretly helped him complete, my parents rewarded him with a new bike. One particularly revealing incident occurred when both Eric and I needed new shoes for school. My sneakers had holes in both soles, while Eric had simply outgrown his still functional pair. At the shoe store, I selected the most affordable option that would last the school year. Eric threw a tantrum, demanding an expensive brand-name pair he had seen in a commercial. Despite our family's financial strain, my parents bought Eric the expensive shoes and told me I would need to contribute $20 from my lawn mowing money toward my basic pair. During this period, I found unexpected support from our elderly neighbor, Mr. Jenkins. A retired engineer, he noticed me sitting on my front porch one afternoon working on math problems while my parents attended Eric's soccer game. He invited me to see his home workshop, and soon we developed a friendship that provided me the mentorship my parents failed to offer. Mr. Six. We Mr. B&I. Jenkins lent me books, taught me about electronics, and most importantly treated me like I mattered. When I expressed confusion about my family situation, he listened without judgment, but encouraged me to focus on building my future, rather than dwelling on what I couldn't change. The summer before high school tensions reached a breaking point when I discovered my parents had borrowed $300 from my carefully saved money to pay for Eric's summer camp after he was asked to leave another program for behavioral issues. When I confronted them, Mom seemed genuinely surprised by my anger. "We're a family, Jason. We all need to make sacrifices," she said. "We'll pay you back eventually." "But it's always me making the sacrifices," I replied, my voice shaking. "When has Eric ever had to give up anything for me?" Dad stepped in, then his tone stern. "That's enough, Jason. You need to be more understanding of your brother's needs. He's not as capable as you are." That night I lay awake planning my future. I had roughly 4 years until graduation, 4 years to prepare for independence. I would need scholarships, work experience, and savings. I resolved that when I eventually left home, it would be for good. The family dynamic was not going to change, but my response to it could. Mr. Jenkins had told me something that became my guiding philosophy. You can't control how others treat you, but you can control what you do about it. By the end of middle school, the inequality had become undeniable and systematic. Every decision, from financial choices to time allocation, revolved around Eric's wants and needs, while mine were treated as optional or insignificant. Yet in this harsh environment, I was developing resilience, self-reliance, and determination that would ultimately serve me better than the entitlement my brother was learning. I didn't know it then, but these painful experiences were forging strengths I would rely on throughout my life. High school intensified both my academic focus and the family divide. By sophomore year, I was taking advanced placement classes while maintaining a perfect GPA. I joined the computer science club and spent hours in the school lab working on coding projects, developing skills that would later become the foundation of my career. My teachers regularly commented on my exceptional work ethic and talent, particularly in STEM subjects. Eric, meanwhile, had entered middle school and was struggling academically and socially. His years of preferential treatment at home had not prepared him for environments where he wasn't automatically deemed special. He frequently got into trouble for disruptive behavior and expected the same lack of consequences he experienced at home. My parents attended numerous meetings with his teachers and administrators, often missing my academic events to do so. Junior year brought an unexpected opportunity. My computer science teacher nominated me for a prestigious summer program at MIT, a competitive scholarship that would allow selected high school students to spend 6 weeks learning from leading professors. When I was accepted, it felt like validation of all my hard work, a chance to experience life beyond my restrictive home environment. The program required a $500 contribution from each student, with the remainder of the substantial cost covered by the scholarship. When I showed my parents the acceptance letter explaining what an honor it was to be selected, they seemed momentarily impressed. Mom even hugged me, something that had become increasingly rare. "We'll have to see if we can manage the fee," Dad said cautiously. "Things are still tight financially." I immediately offered to contribute $300 from my savings, needing only $200 from them for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They promised to discuss it and let me know. 2 weeks later, I overheard a conversation that would permanently alter my relationship with my parents. They were discussing finances in the kitchen, unaware I was approaching. "I know we promised to think about Jason's summer program, but Eric's private school application fee is due next week," Mom was saying. "It's $1,500 just to apply, and if he gets in, the tuition deposit will be another $3,000. "Do you really think private school is necessary?" Dad asked. "It's so expensive." "You've seen his grades and behavior reports," Mom replied firmly. "Public high school will eat him alive. He needs the smaller classes and extra attention. Besides, we have Jason's college fund we can use. He can get scholarships with his grades." I froze in the hallway, blood rushing in my ears. My college fund. The account my grandparents had started when I was born, that my parents had occasionally mentioned as the reason I should focus on academics. the fund I had counted on as the foundation of my future independence. Dad sighed heavily. I guess you're right. Jason will be fine no matter what. He always lands on his feet. Exactly, Mom agreed. Eric needs this opportunity more than Jason needs that summer program. I retreated silently to my room, mind racing. That evening at dinner, I calmly asked about the status of my summer program payment, giving them the opportunity to be honest with me. About that, Dad began awkwardly. We've looked at the finances, and it's just not possible right now. We're really sorry, honey, Mom added. Maybe next summer. I nodded slowly, then asked the question I already knew the answer to. Is it because of Eric's private school application? Their surprised expressions confirmed they hadn't known I overheard them. Mom recovered quickly, her tone defensive. That's part of it, yes. Eric needs special academic support that we can't get for free. And my college fund, I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Are you planning to use that for Eric's tuition? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Eric smirked slightly, continuing to eat his dinner. Jason, Dad finally said, family resources go where they're most needed. Eric struggles more than you do. We've always known you'd get scholarships, Mom added. You're so smart and capable. Eric needs more help to succeed. The injustice of it all crashed over me. So I work hard, get good grades, never cause problems, and my reward is having my future stolen to finance Eric's mediocrity. Watch your tone, Dad warned. No, I said, standing up. I've watched my tone for years. I've accepted being treated like I matter less. But this is different. That money was for my education, my future. Eric needs it more, Mom said firmly. You'll be fine on your own. Eric's smug expression as he watched this exchange was the final straw. He knew exactly what was happening and felt entitled to the resources meant for me. Then I'll be on my own, I said quietly. Starting now. I left the dinner table and went to my room, shutting the door behind me. That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I would graduate early using the extra credits I had accumulated. I would work more hours, save every penny, and prepare to leave this house where I was valued only for what I could sacrifice for my brother. The next morning, I spoke with my guidance counselor about graduating at the end of the first semester of senior year, a full term early. I increased my lawn mowing client list and took on a weekend job at a local grocery store. I declined the MIT summer program since I couldn't afford it, but I channeled my disappointment into determination. My parents made half-hearted attempts to smooth things over in the following weeks, but notably they didn't reverse their decision about my college fund. Eric was accepted into the expensive private school, and my college savings were systematically drained to pay for it. The night before I left home, having graduated a semester early at 17, I packed everything I valued into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Looking around my childhood bedroom, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. This room had been both sanctuary and prison, a place where I had nurtured dreams that would now need to sustain me in the outside world. My last stop before leaving town was Mr. Jenkins' house. The elderly man who had shown me more genuine support than my own parents listened as I explained my plans to move to Boston, where I had secured both a scholarship to a state college and a job at a computer repair shop. I always knew you were destined for bigger things than this town, he said, eyes watery. I'm proud of you, son. He pressed an envelope into my hand containing $1,000. I've been saving this for you. Call it an investment in a future I know will be bright. I tried to refuse, but he insisted. You remind me of myself at your age. Sometimes the hardest beginnings lead to the strongest journeys. We hugged goodbye, and as I walked to the bus station, I felt simultaneously terrified and resolved. At 17, I was stepping into an uncertain future, carrying wounds of rejection, but also the strength forged by years of self-reliance. I did not know what awaited me, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again make myself small to accommodate those who could not see my value. My first apartment in Boston was barely larger than a closet, a studio basement unit with a hot plate instead of a kitchen, and a bathroom shared with another tenant. The rent consumed nearly half my income from the computer repair shop, leaving me with careful calculations for every remaining dollar. I divided my life into precise segments: classes during the day, work evenings and weekends, studying deep into the night. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. College presented both opportunities and challenges. My scholarship covered tuition, but not books or supplies. I became an expert at finding used textbooks, borrowing from the library, and taking meticulous notes to avoid printing costs. While other students socialized and joined clubs, I worked extra shifts, often eating nothing but ramen noodles for days straight to save money for unexpected expenses. Despite these hardships, I thrived academically. Professors noticed my dedication and technical aptitude, particularly in computer science courses. By the end of freshman year, one recommended me for a research assistant position that paid slightly better than the repair shop. I accepted immediately, adding valuable experience to my resume while marginally improving my financial situation. During those early years of independence, communication with my family was sparse and strained. Mom would call occasionally, but our conversations inevitably centered around Eric and his experiences at his expensive private school. She never asked about my living conditions, my financial struggles, or whether I had enough to eat. When I mentioned receiving an academic award, she responded with a quick, "That's nice," before launching into a story about Eric's latest school project. Midway through sophomore year, I learned through one of these phone calls that Eric had been expelled from the private school my college fund had paid for. Apparently, he had been caught cheating multiple times and had shown disrespect to faculty. Rather than holding him accountable, my parents had already enrolled him in another, even more expensive school that specialized in misunderstood students. We had to dip into our retirement savings, Mom explained, not recognizing the irony of this additional sacrifice after depleting my educational funds. But Eric deserves another chance in the right environment. I bit back the obvious questions. What about my chances? What about my environment? Instead, I simply said, "I hope it works out," and changed the subject. The summer after sophomore year marked a turning point. Unable to afford returning home and unwilling to face the family dynamics, I found a roommate situation that allowed me to stay in Boston year-round. My new roommate, Alex, was a business major with an entrepreneurial mindset that complemented my technical skills. We stayed up late discussing ideas, possibilities, and the emerging world of internet startups that was beginning to transform the economy. "You know," Alex said one night as we shared cheap pizza, "the coding projects you work on for fun are better than what most established companies are doing. Have you ever thought about developing something commercially?" I hadn't. My focus had been survival and education, not entrepreneurship. But Alex's question planted a seed that would grow into something significant. Junior year brought increasing academic pressure, but also greater recognition of my abilities. I was invited to join an honors research program working directly with a professor developing new database management systems. The stipend was modest, but allowed me to reduce my repair shop hours slightly, giving me precious time to collaborate with Alex on what we began calling our side project. Evenings and weekends, we developed a program that streamlined inventory management for small businesses, addressing inefficiencies we had observed at local shops. Alex handled market research and business planning, while I coded late into the night, running on caffeine and determination. By senior year, we had a functioning prototype and a growing vision. My professor, impressed with my work ethic and abilities, became an informal advisor, offering technical guidance and eventually introducing us to a small business incubator affiliated with the university. Around this time, I received news from home that surprised me despite its predictability. Eric had dropped out of the second expensive school, declaring education not his thing. My parents, rather than insisting he find employment, had financed his discovery year, allowing him to live at home while finding himself through a series of expensive hobbies that each lasted about 2 weeks. Meanwhile, I was preparing to graduate with honors, having completed a rigorous computer science degree while working throughout my college years. When graduation day arrived, I stood among my peers, feeling a complex mixture of pride and solitude. Looking out at the audience of proud families, I saw neither of my parents. I had invited them more out of social convention than expectation, and received a vague response about prior commitments. Later, I learned these commitments involved attending Eric's community theater performance in a minor role. After graduation, Alex and I took a calculated risk. Instead of accepting the corporate job offers we had received, we applied to the business incubator with our inventory management software. Our acceptance came with a small grant workspace and mentorship enough to pursue our vision full-time for 6 months. Those 6 months tested everything I had learned about perseverance. We worked 18-hour days refining our product, meeting with potential clients and making endless adjustments based on feedback. We ate cheap takeout at our desks, slept on office couches when necessary, and poured every ounce of energy into making our company viable. The breakthrough came when a regional retail chain agreed to pilot our software in 3 locations. Their positive results led to full implementation across 20 stores, providing our first significant revenue. Other clients followed, and by the end of our incubator period, we had secured enough funding from angel investors to establish proper offices and hire our first employees. As our company grew, I occasionally reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The painful lessons of my childhood had ironically prepared me for entrepreneurship in ways privilege might not have. I knew how to function with limited resources, how to persevere when no external validation came, and how to believe in my own value when others did not. 5 years after graduation, our company had grown to 30 employees with clients across the country. We had developed additional products, expanded our market reach, and begun attracting attention from larger tech corporations. Alex and I had moved from cramped apartments to comfortable condos, from grocery store budgeting to financial security. Through it all, my contact with family remained minimal. Christmas cards, occasional phone calls, and brief updates constituted our relationship. They knew I had some kind of computer business, but showed little interest in understanding what I actually did. When they mentioned pride in my accomplishments, it felt hollow, an afterthought to detailed updates about Eric's latest endeavors, which now included a series of short-lived jobs interspersed with extended periods of unemployment. I had built a life from nothing, but more importantly, I had built myself without the foundation of family support most take for granted. Each challenge overcome and milestone achieved represented not just professional success, but personal validation that I was and always had been worthy of investment. The knowledge that I had done this entirely on my own became both shield and sword, protecting me from old wounds while empowering me to keep moving forward. By my late 20s, our company had transformed from a promising startup into a genuine success story. After securing a major investment round, we expanded our product line and opened offices in 3 additional cities. Industry publications began featuring our innovative approaches, and larger tech companies started expressing interest in potential acquisitions. My role had evolved from hands-on coding to strategic leadership. I now headed a team of talented developers guiding our technical vision, while Alex managed our growing business operations. The long hours and financial stress of our early days had given way to new challenges, managing rapid growth, maintaining company culture, and making decisions that affected dozens of employees. On a personal level, I had finally achieved financial security beyond what I had ever imagined. I purchased a penthouse apartment in Boston with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a tangible symbol of how far I had come from that first basement studio. I began cautiously enjoying my success, upgrading from thrift store clothes to tailored suits, from public transportation to a luxury car. More significant than these material changes was my emotional growth. At the suggestion of Alex, who had witnessed my occasional struggles with the ghosts of my past, I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma. Those weekly sessions helped me process the deep wounds of childhood favoritism and develop healthier approaches to relationships and self-worth. I also cultivated a chosen family of close friends and colleagues who provided the support network I had never had. Weekend dinners, holiday celebrations, and genuine connections filled the void left by my biological family. Particularly important was my relationship with Rachel, a graphic designer I met through a business conference. Her warmth, creativity, and emotional intelligence complemented my more analytical nature, and together we built a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care. Meanwhile, through infrequent communications and updates from mutual acquaintances, I learned that my family situation was deteriorating. Dad had developed health problems that limited his ability to work full-time. Rather than adjusting their lifestyle accordingly, my parents had maintained their financial habits, particularly their continued support of Eric. Now in his mid-20s, Eric had established a pattern of employment failure. He would obtain jobs through my parents' connections, work for a few months, then quit or get fired due to attendance issues or conflicts with management. After each job loss, he would return to living in my parents' home, where he contributed nothing to household expenses while developing increasingly expensive hobbies that my parents somehow funded. The most revealing incident came through a chance meeting with my mother's cousin at an industry event in Chicago. She recognized my name from the conference program and approached me afterward. "Jason, I thought that might be you," she said, studying my face. "You look so different from when you were younger. So professional now." After awkward small talk, she mentioned my parents eventually revealing that they had recently remortgaged their house to provide startup capital for Eric's business idea, a specialty coffee shop, despite his having no experience in A&A, food service or business management. "They put everything on the line for that venture," she confided. "Your father even delayed some medical treatments to free up money. Between us, I think they're in over their heads, but they're so determined to see Eric succeed." The coffee shop failed within 6 months, leaving my parents with additional debt and nothing to show for their investment. Yet this pattern continued, with Eric moving from one poorly conceived venture to another, each funded by my increasingly financially strained parents. Learning these details triggered complicated emotions. Part of me felt vindicated that the golden child strategy was yielding its inevitable results. Another part felt genuine concern for my aging parents, who were sacrificing their retirement security and health for a son who showed no appreciation for their sacrifices. I processed these feelings in therapy, working to separate my lingering hurt from rational assessment of the situation. A significant milestone for our company came when a major tech corporation offered to acquire our inventory management system for a substantial sum. After lengthy negotiations and careful consideration of our options, Alex and I agreed to the acquisition with conditions that protected our employees and our vision for the product. The deal made us both wealthy beyond what we had ever anticipated when working from that cramped incubator space. Following the acquisition, I took a brief sabbatical to travel and consider my next steps. During a month in Japan, I found myself reflecting on my journey and the stark contrast between my current reality and what might have been had I remained emotionally tethered to my family's dysfunction. The distance, both geographical and emotional, provided clarity about how the painful experiences of my youth had paradoxically equipped me with the resilience and determination that fueled my success. Upon returning to Boston, I made several significant decisions. First, I purchased my dream home, a restored brownstone with space for both private comfort and entertaining. Creating this home environment represented more than material success. It was about establishing the stable, supportive space I had been denied growing up. Second, I decided to launch a new tech venture, focused on educational software, an area I felt passionate about given my own experiences. This company would incorporate a social mission, including scholarship programs for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Third, I established firm boundaries regarding family contact. I would respond to occasional communications, but would not allow myself to be drawn into their financial drama or Eric's endless series of failed endeavors. I recognized that while I could not change the past or their behavior, I could control my response to it. These boundaries were tested when I received a holiday card from my parents containing a carefully worded hint about their financial difficulties and Eric's latest unemployment situation. The subtext was clear: they were fishing for financial assistance. I sent a polite but brief response, wishing them well, but offering no opening for monetary discussions. As my new company gained traction and my relationship with Rachel deepened, I found myself achieving something that had once seemed impossible: genuine contentment. The wounded child seeking validation had grown into a man who understood his own worth, independent of others' assessment. The painful lessons of my youth had been transformed into wisdom that guided both my business decisions and personal relationships. Yet, despite this healing and success, I could never have anticipated how directly my past and present would collide when the family that had once deemed me unworthy of investment would come seeking salvation from the very success they had never supported. The call came on a Tuesday morning as I reviewed quarterly projections with my executive team. Seeing my mother's name on the caller ID was unusual enough that I excused myself to answer. "Jason." Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, tentative, in a way that immediately signaled this wasn't a routine check-in. "Do you have a moment to talk?" After dismissing my team, I settled behind my desk. "I have a few minutes." "What's going on?" What followed was a carefully constructed narrative of family crisis. Dad's health had deteriorated, significantly requiring expensive treatments their insurance only partially covered. Simultaneously, they had fallen 3 months behind on mortgage payments after co-signing for Eric's failed restaurant venture, putting them at imminent risk of foreclosure. The final component of their perfect storm was Eric's legal troubles stemming from a DUI incident that required substantial legal fees. "We've never asked you for anything," Jason, Mom said, her voice breaking slightly. "But we're desperate. We need $75,000 to keep the house and get your father's treatment started. We have nowhere else to turn." The sum she mentioned would barely impact my finances, equivalent to what I might spend on a luxury vacation or high-end watch. Yet the request carried the weight of our entire complicated history. "We're so proud of what you've accomplished," she continued when I didn't immediately respond. "Your father and I were just saying the other day how you've always been so smart and capable. We always knew you'd do well." The revision of history was almost impressive. In her retelling, they had always believed in me, always valued my abilities. The reality of their decades of prioritizing Eric at my expense was conveniently absent from this narrative. "I need some time to think about this," I said finally. "I'll call you back in a few days." After ending the call, I sat motionless, processing the surreal situation. The family that had drained my college fund for Eric's failed education, that had missed my graduation for his community theater performance, that had never shown interest in my business beyond vague acknowledgments, was now turning to me as their financial savior. That evening, I shared the situation with Rachel as we prepared dinner in our kitchen. $75,000, she repeated, setting down her wine glass. "That's a significant amount even for you. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about how many times I needed just a fraction of that amount," I replied, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "When I was eating ramen for weeks straight in college. When my car broke down and I couldn't afford repairs. When I needed dental work I had to postpone for years." Rachel listened without judgment, allowing me space to process aloud. "But it's not really about the money," I continued. "It's about what it represents. They never invested in me emotionally or financially. Now they want me to invest in them to bail them out of problems, created largely by continuing the same pattern of enabling Eric at their own expense." "What about your dad's health issues?" Rachel asked gently. "That part isn't Eric's fault." Her question cut through my anger, reminding me that the situation contained genuine need alongside the irony and injustice. Dad's medical condition wasn't a manipulation tactic. It was a real concern that deserved consideration separate from my complicated feelings about my family dynamics. The next day, I did something I hadn't initially planned. I hired a discreet financial investigator to verify my family's situation before making any decision. This wasn't about distrust so much as needing complete information to make a sound judgment unclouded by emotional reaction. The investigator's report confirmed the core elements of my mother's story. The house was indeed in pre-foreclosure. Dad had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition requiring surgery and ongoing treatment. Eric had accumulated legal fees from multiple incidents, not just the DUI my mother had mentioned. What the report also revealed, however, was that even in their financial crisis, my parents were still supporting Eric financially. He lived in their basement rent-free at 30, drove a car they had purchased for him last year, and received regular loans that were never repaid. Meanwhile, they had cashed out their remaining retirement accounts and taken a second mortgage before falling behind on payments. Most revealing was information about Eric himself. Despite his supposed unemployment, he spent lavishly on entertainment and restaurant meals. His social media showed recent vacations and expensive purchases, all while my parents faced losing their home. He had made no apparent effort to contribute meaningfully to resolving the family crisis. Armed with this complete picture, I spent a weekend contemplating my options, discussing them with both Rachel and my therapist. 3 clear choices emerged. I could provide the full amount requested, essentially rewarding the dysfunctional pattern that had created the crisis. I could refuse, entirely protecting my boundaries but potentially allowing genuine medical needs to go unaddressed. Or I could find a middle path that acknowledged the complexity of the situation. The decision crystallized during a long Sunday walk through Boston Common with Rachel. "What would actually help them?" she asked, as we sat on a bench watching families enjoy the spring afternoon. Not what would temporarily solve the immediate crisis, but what would genuinely help them long term. Her question shifted my perspective. Simply writing a check would address symptoms but reinforce the underlying dysfunction. My parents needed more than financial rescue. They needed to break the enabling cycle that had created their vulnerability in the first place. Monday morning, I called my mother. "I've made a decision about your request," I said when she answered eagerly. "I'm not going to give you $75,000. Her sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. Instead, I continued before she could respond. "I'm offering something different. I'll connect Dad with a top cardiologist in my network and cover his medical expenses directly. For the house, I'll have my financial advisor work with you on restructuring your debt and creating a sustainable budget, but that plan must include Eric taking financial responsibility for himself." "But we need the money now," she protested. "The foreclosure notice has already." "I understand the urgency," I interrupted gently. "My team will contact the mortgage company today to halt proceedings temporarily while we establish a proper plan. But I won't simply hand over money that ultimately enables the same patterns that created this situation." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken history disappointment and the difficult truth that real help sometimes doesn't look like what we think we want. "You've always been so stubborn," she finally said, her tone a mixture of resentment and resignation. "I don't know why we thought you'd help when you've been so distant all these years." I recognized the attempted guilt manipulation, a familiar tactic from my childhood. Rather than engaging with it, I simply stated, "This is my offer. It addresses the genuine needs while requiring changes that will actually improve your situation long term. Let me know by tomorrow if you want to accept it." After ending the call, I felt a profound sense of clarity. For perhaps the first time in my relationship with my family, I had established terms based on genuine care rather than exploitation or avoidance. Whether they accepted or not, I had responded from a place of integrity, rather than either resentment or capitulation. The decision represented more than a response to a financial request. It marked a new chapter in my ongoing journey of healing. I was neither abandoning my family and their genuine need, nor sacrificing my hard-won boundaries and enabling destructive patterns. I was offering real help, not just financial band-aids, and in doing so, honoring both their humanity and my own. 3 days of silence followed my counteroffer. On the 4th day, my phone rang during my morning coffee. Dad's name appeared on the screen, surprising me since he rarely initiated contact. "Jason," he said, his voice noticeably weaker than I remembered. "Your mother told me about your conversation. We need to talk." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop midway between our locations the following weekend. The neutrality of the setting seemed appropriate for what promised to be a difficult conversation. When Saturday arrived, I entered the cafe to find my father already seated in a corner booth. The physical changes in him were shocking. The robust man of my childhood had become thin and gray, his confident posture replaced by a slight stoop. Despite our complicated history, seeing his vulnerability stirred unexpected compassion. "You look well," he said, after awkward greetings. "Success suits you." "Thank you," I replied, settling across from him. "How are you feeling?" Mom mentioned heart problems. He waved dismissively. "Getting old isn't for the faint of heart, quite literally." But I didn't come to talk about my health. For the next 20 minutes, he presented arguments for why I should simply provide the requested money. He emphasized family obligation, reminded me of childhood events selectively remembered to paint a more balanced picture than reality, and suggested that my success created a responsibility to help those less fortunate, particularly family. I listened without interruption, noting the absence of any acknowledgement of past favoritism or unfairness. When he finished, I took a deliberate sip of coffee before responding. "Dad, I've made my position clear. I'll help with your medical needs directly and assist with financial restructuring. But I won't provide cash that perpetuates patterns that have been destructive for everyone, including Eric." His expression hardened. "You've always been jealous of your brother. Even as a child, you resented any attention he received." The accusation was so predictable it almost made me laugh. Instead, I replied calmly, "That's not jealousy, Dad. That was a child's natural response to profound unfairness. You and Mom consistently prioritized Eric at my expense, from emotional attention to financial support. You took my college fund for his private school tuition after he failed at public school. You missed my graduation for his theater performance. These aren't perceptions or jealousy, they're facts. My directness clearly surprised him. In our family system, uncomfortable truths had always been avoided rather than confronted. We did the best we could with two very different children, he said defensively. Eric needed more support, and that belief became a self-fulfilling prophecy, I replied. You decided early on that he needed more and I needed less, so that's exactly what you gave us. The results speak for themselves. Something in my steady tone must have reached him, because his defensive posture suddenly deflated. For several moments he stared into his coffee cup. When he looked up, I glimpsed something I had never seen before: recognition. We made mistakes, he admitted quietly. Looking back, I can see that now. We thought we were responding to your strengths by focusing on Eric's weaknesses, but we probably just created more problems for both of you. The acknowledgement, however limited, was more than I had ever expected to hear. It created an opening for honesty, without accusation. I'm not offering conditional help to punish anyone, I explained. I'm offering the kind of help that might actually create positive change. Dad, you and Mom are on the verge of homelessness while still financing Eric's lifestyle. That's not sustainable with or without my intervention. Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, moving gradually from defensiveness to something approaching genuine communication. I shared parts of my journey he had never asked about before: the struggles of those early independent years, the development of my business, the personal growth that paralleled my professional success. By the end of our meeting, we had reached a tentative agreement. I would arrange for his medical treatment with a specialist in cardiac care. My financial advisor would work with them on a sustainable plan for keeping their home contingent on new boundaries with Eric. It wasn't the unconditional bailout they had initially sought, but it was substantive help that addressed the core issues rather than just symptoms. As we prepared to leave, Dad hesitated, then said something that suggested real reflection had occurred. I'm sorry, Jason. We should have been there for you more. You deserved better than what we gave you. The simple apology, 3 decades overdue, couldn't erase the past, but offered a potential bridge toward a different future relationship. Implementation of our agreement revealed predictable challenges. Mom initially resisted the financial restructuring, particularly the requirements regarding Eric. Dad, however, having glimpsed the reality of their situation during our conversation, became an unexpected ally in establishing new boundaries. Eric's reaction was exactly as I had anticipated. When informed that the parental subsidy was ending, he appeared at my office unannounced, demanding to speak with me. Security called up, and against my better judgment, I agreed to see him. The brother who entered my office was a stranger wearing familiar features. Physically, he resembled our father before his illness, but his expression carried a permanent entitlement I recognized from our childhood. So you're the big success story, he said, looking around my office with poorly disguised envy. Must be nice to have so much that you can dictate terms to your own family. What can I help you with, Eric? I asked, maintaining professional composure. What followed was a tirade, alternating between accusations of family disloyalty and thinly veiled requests for direct financial support that would bypass our parents. When these approaches failed, he shifted to reminiscing about our childhood, selectively recalling moments of brotherly camaraderie that existed primarily in his imagination. Look, I finally said, interrupting his increasingly desperate monologue, I'm not going to give you money. What I will offer is the same thing I offered Mom and Dad: help finding employment through my professional network, financial counseling, and support for actual steps toward independence. But no cash handouts. His expression contorted with anger. You always thought you were better than everyone else. Just because you got lucky with some computer thing doesn't make you superior. I recognized his anger as the natural response of someone seeing their comfortable dependency threatened. Rather than engaging with the accusation, I simply restated my offer of constructive help and ended the meeting. Over the following months, a new family dynamic gradually emerged. Dad completed his surgery and began recovery with the excellent medical team I had arranged. My financial advisor helped my parents create a sustainable budget and restructure their mortgage to manageable payments. Most significantly, they began establishing actual boundaries with Eric, who initially reacted with increased demands, but eventually, when those proved ineffective, began taking tentative steps toward self-sufficiency. Our family relationship would never be close in the conventional sense. Too much history stood between us for uncomplicated affection, but we established a new pattern of limited, respectful contact. Monthly phone calls, occasional emails sharing genuine updates rather than manipulative requests. A cautious rebuilding of connection without the toxicity that had characterized our previous dynamics. As for Eric, his journey toward responsibility proved inconsistent but showed occasional progress. When he finally secured steady employment and maintained it for 6 months, I fulfilled my promise to help him establish a basic financial foundation, paying for a certified financial planning course and matching his first 3 months of retirement contributions. The family healing process taught me something profound. Forgiveness isn't about pretending harm never occurred or forcing artificial closeness. It's about releasing the expectation that the past could have been different, while creating boundaries that protect you from further harm. It's possible to acknowledge others' humanity without subjecting yourself to continued exploitation. Standing now in my corner office overlooking Boston Harbor, I reflect on the journey from forgotten child to successful entrepreneur, from family scapegoat to autonomous adult, capable of generosity without self-sacrifice. The path was neither simple nor linear, marked by painful lessons and hard-won wisdom. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that your value never depended on others recognizing it. Those who failed to see your worth revealed their own limitations, not yours. True success isn't measured by bank accounts or business achievements, but by building a life aligned with your authentic self, establishing relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation, and finding the courage to break harmful cycles even when they're wrapped in the powerful language of family obligation. Would you have made the same choice I did when faced with my family's request? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones who couldn't see your true value? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more reflections on family dynamics, personal growth, and the complex journey toward authentic success. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the greatest act of love, both for yourself and others, is having the courage to break destructive patterns and create something healthier in their place.